Hey WOW TV fam. I just wanted to quickly thank you for being here. Crafting these videos takes time, and if you enjoy what you see, a like goes a long way. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss out on our content and help our community grow. I love hearing your thoughts, so drop a comment with any suggestions or feedback. Alright, let's dive into today's video. Robert Hansen, born on February 15, 1939, in Estherville, Iowa, was the eldest of two children to his American mother, Edna Margaret Hansen. She was born on October 27, 1916, died on April 24, 2005, and Danish father, local baker Christian or Chris Hansen. He was born on September 16, 1907 and died on August 12, 1983. Early in his life, Hansen worked at his father's bakery. Despite the family's move to Richmond, California, in 1942, they returned to Iowa in 1949, ultimately settling in Pocahontas. Hansen's formative years were marked by challenges. He was painfully shy, had a stutter, and suffered from severe acne that left permanent scars. Described as a quiet loner, he faced a difficult relationship with his domineering father. During his youth, Hansen sought solace in the activities of hunting and archery, becoming proficient in both. In 1957, Hansen enlisted in the United States Army Reserve, serving for 1 year before receiving his discharge. Following this, he took on the role of an assistant drill instructor at a police academy in Pocahontas. It was during this period that he initiated a relationship with a younger woman, eventually marrying her in the summer of 1960. On December 7, 1960, Hansen's criminal history began with a shocking act of arson. Seeking revenge for his perceived unpopularity in high school, he set fire to a Pocahontas County school bus garage. This incident led to his arrest and subsequent imprisonment at Anamosa State Penitentiary, where he served 20 months of a 3-year sentence. It was during this period that he received a diagnosis of manic depression with periodic schizophrenic episodes from a psychiatrist. The diagnosis highlighted Hansen's infantile personality and a disturbing obsession with seeking revenge against those he believed had wronged him. As he languished in prison, his wife filed for divorce. In the ensuing years, Hansen found himself in trouble with the law multiple times, primarily for petty theft. Despite these run-ins, he eventually moved to Anchorage, Alaska, in 1967, accompanied by his second wife and their 2 children. Surprisingly, in his new surroundings, Hansen cultivated a positive image. He became well-liked by his neighbors and even achieved local acclaim by setting several hunting records. However, the facade of normalcy quickly crumbled. In December 1971, Hansen was arrested twice within a short span. The first arrest involved the abduction and attempted rape of an unidentified housewife, while the second was for the rape of an unidentified prostitute. In a plea bargain, the rape charge was dropped, and Hansen pleaded no contest to assault with a deadly weapon in the first offense. He received a 5-year prison sentence but was released to a halfway house after serving only 6 months as part of a work release program. The pattern of criminal behavior continued. In 1976, Hansen faced legal consequences for stealing a chainsaw from an Anchorage Fred Meyer store, pleading guilty to larceny. This time, his bipolar disorder came into focus, leading to a sentence of 5 years in prison, coupled with a requirement for psychiatric treatment. However, the Alaska Supreme Court later reduced his sentence, resulting in his release with time served. These early criminal episodes set the stage for the more sinister crimes that would later define Robert Hansen's dark legacy. Around 1972, Robert Hansen is believed to have embarked on a chilling killing spree that would terrorize Anchorage, Alaska. His modus operandi was both calculated and sadistic. Hansen would pick up prostitutes in his car, force them at gunpoint to his home, where he would rape them. Subsequently, he would take them to remote areas, treating them like prey in a sick hunt before ultimately shooting or stabbing them. Authorities believe Hansen's first murder victim was 18-year-old Celia Van Zanten, kidnapped on December 22, 1971. Tragically, she froze to death in the wilderness after escaping her abductor, with her body discovered on December 25. Although there are striking similarities between Hansen's modus operandi and Van Zanten's abduction, concrete evidence linking him to the attack remains elusive, and he vehemently denied involvement. The brutality escalated in 1983 when Hansen encountered 17-year-old Cindy Paulson. Offering her $200 for oral sex, he instead abducted, raped, and tortured her. Chained in his basement, Paulson managed a daring escape, fleeing when Hansen briefly turned his attention away to load his airplane at Merrill Field Airport. Paulson's escape triggered a series of events that led to Hansen's eventual capture. When she reached safety, Paulson left her sneakers in the back seat of Hansen's car as evidence. A concerned passerby, Robert Yount, picked her up and reported the incident to the police. Although initially denying the accusations, Hansen's facade began to crumble. Detective Glenn Floth of the Alaska State Troopers, investigating a string of unsolved murders, sought assistance from FBI Special Agent John Douglas. Douglas provided a profile of the killer as an experienced hunter with low self-esteem and a penchant for keeping souvenirs. Supported by Paulson's testimony and Douglas' profile, Floth obtained a warrant to search Hansen's property. On October 27, 1983, investigators uncovered a chilling array of evidence in Hansen's home. Jewelry belonging to missing women, an arsenal of firearms, and a murder map with marked locations matching crime scenes were discovered. Behind Hansen's meek demeanor and humble occupation as a baker hid a sinister truth. Confronted with the damning evidence, Hansen initially denied involvement but eventually confessed. He admitted to a spree of attacks against Alaskan women, spanning from 1971. His earliest victims were not prostitutes, unlike those who had initially led to his discovery, revealing a disturbing pattern of brutality and predation. The revelation of Hansen's dark secrets marked the beginning of the end for the notorious butcher baker. Hansen's heinous acts extended beyond mere criminal accusations. The extent of his brutality involved the rape and assault of over 30 Alaskan women, with confirmed murders numbering at least 17, spanning ages 16 to 41. Law enforcement suspicions, based on compelling evidence, suggest that Hansen's true victim count may reach as high as 21. The roster of Hansen's known victims, along with additional women identified as possible targets, sheds light on the scale of his atrocities. Among the 18 women mentioned, Hansen faced formal charges for the murders of only 4, Sherry Morrow, Joanna Messina, Eklutna Annie, and Paula Golding. Additionally, he faced charges for the kidnapping and rape of Cindy Paulson, as the full extent of his gruesome crimes slowly came to light. List of the victims. Celia Beth Van Zanten, then 18 years old, was at home with 2 of her 3 older brothers on December 22, 1971. The 3 of them shared a house on Conick Avenue in South Anchorage, close to Northern Lights Boulevard, with their older brother and cousin. Her parents resided in a different home in Anchorage. In the late evening, Beth left her house and walked a few blocks to the nearby Bilo supermarket. The Bilo closed at 9 p.m., and she left at 8:30. Between 8:45 and 9 p.m., a witness spotted Beth go to the Bilo. At around 9 p.m., a neighbor claimed to have spotted her on Northern Lights Boulevard. She never reached the Bilo. Her disappearance was reported 2 days later. On December 25, 1971, her body was discovered at Chugach State Park, close to Anchorage. Her chest had been sliced with a knife, and she had been bound and subjected to a sexual assault. She had been dumped, still alive, into a deep ravine before passing away from exposure. According to forensic evidence, she attempted to climb back up the slope but was unable to do so due to her bindings. Hansen has been accused of killing her because of an X on his aircraft map, but he denied responsibility for both her death and other women's homicides who were not involved in prostitution. Megan Siobhan Emmerich, then 17, vanished on July 7, 1973, in Seward, Alaska. She was last spotted leaving a dorm laundry room while attending the boarding school Seward Skill Center. She has not been seen or heard from since. Megan left behind all of her personal items, including her identification. Before contacting the police, her roommate conducted a 3-day search for her. Hansen denied killing her to authorities, but he did admit he was in Seward on the day Megan vanished. Due to an X on his aircraft map in the Seward region, he is thought to be responsible. Apparently, Hansen admitted to a former inmate that he transported Megan to a cabin in the Seward region that was only reachable by boat, where he killed and buried her. On July 5, 1975, Mary Kathleen Thill, aged 22, disappeared from Seward, Alaska. Her husband was away working on the Trans-Alaska Pipeline and she lived on Lower Point Road. She was driven into town by a friend, who then dropped her off at a local bakery. Between 1:30 and 2 p.m., a different acquaintance saw her by a waterfall on Lowell Point Road. She has not been seen or heard from since. Hansen acknowledged being in Seward on the day Thill vanished but denied killing her. An X on his aviation chart in the vicinity of Resurrection Bay increased suspicions about him. Hansen admitted to killing her and discarding her body in Resurrection Bay, according to a former prisoner. The remains of Eklutna Annie were discovered buried next to a power line in a wooded area, 1 mile south of South Eklutna Lake Road in Eklutna, Anchorage, Alaska on July 21, 1980. Hansen admitted to stabbing her in the back after she made an effort to flee from his car. She was either a topless dancer or a prostitute, according to Hansen, who also claimed that she was his first murder victim. Despite his claim that Eklutna Annie might have come from Kodiak, Alaska, troopers think she might have arrived in Alaska via California. Her body had already been largely consumed by wildlife when it was found in a shallow grave near Eklutna Lake Road. Local topless dancer 24-year-old Joanne Messina went out to dinner with Hansen on May 19, 1980, while she was working in Seward, Alaska. Before she offered him sex in exchange for cash, Hansen claimed that everything was going smoothly. Hansen refused to pay and refused to release her, so he drove her and her dog to a distant place by the Snow River. He hit her with a .22 caliber revolver before shooting her twice and the dog once. He brought Messina's body to a gravel pit nearby and dumped gravel over her body. The dog and Messina's belongings were thrown into the woods, and the gun was thrown into the Snow River. On July 8, 1980, her severely decomposed body was found after it had been eviscerated by wildlife. On June 28, 1980, Roxanne Eastland, then 24 years old, vanished. She had been residing at the Budget Motel on Spenard Road in Anchorage, Alaska, with her boyfriend for the previous 2 weeks. On that day, she was scheduled to meet an unnamed man downtown on 4th Avenue. She has not been seen or heard from since. Although Hansen admitted to killing her, her body was never discovered. At the nightclub she worked in Anchorage, Lisa Futrell met and was subsequently kidnapped by Hansen on September 6, 1980. When the 41-year-old failed to return home following her September 7 shift at the club, her 2 younger housemates reported her missing. Her body was discovered on May 9, 1984, buried next to a gravel pit south of the former Nick Arm Bridge. Sherry Morrow, a 23-year-old topless dancer, told friends she was meeting a photographer who had promised her $300 for nude images on November 17, 1981. She was never seen again. A shallow grave was discovered by hunters on the banks of the Nick River, which borders Anchorage, on September 12, 1982. Morrow, who was reported missing a year earlier, was identified from the remains. She had received 3 gunshot wounds to the back, and cartridges discovered close to the body revealed that a .223 Ruger Mini 14 hunting rifle had been used to deliver the shots. An odd feature was that although the body was found fully clothed, there were no bullet holes in the clothing, suggesting that Sherry had been naked when shot, and had been redressed after death before being buried. At 11 p.m. on December 2, 1981, Andrea Mona Fish Altieri, 24, was last seen boarding a taxi to go to the Boniface Mall in Anchorage, Alaska. She intended to meet an unnamed male for a photo shoot and to perform exotic dances. She has not been seen or heard from since. When authorities searched Hansen's house, several of Altieri's possessions, including her fish necklace, were discovered. Hansen claimed that after he met her, he threatened her with a gun and abducted her, blindfolding and handcuffing her. Near the Nick Arm Bridge, they took a car to a service road off Palmer Highway. He unbound her there and abused her sexually. He killed her with a .22 Browning automatic pistol after she retaliated. He then stole Altieri's necklace, weighted a duffel bag with gravel, tied it to the dead woman and threw her off the bridge and into the Knik River. Her body was never found. Sue Luna, a 23-year-old exotic dancer, voluntarily agreed to a $300 photo shoot offer with a nightclub patron. On May 26, 1982, she met Hansen in a diner parking lot in Anchorage, Alaska. The following day, Luna was reported missing. Hansen had abducted and killed Luna, then buried Luna in the Knik River. She was discovered on April 24, 1984. Hansen had her flee into the forest while hunting her like an animal while she was stripped naked. She had been shot to death. The partial skeletal remains of Robin Pelkey, 19, were found on April 25, 1984, in Palmer, Alaska, close to Horseshoe Lake. It was determined that she had been stabbed and shot. It is unknown if this victim was involved in sex work. In October 2021, forensic genealogy was used to determine her identity, having been known by the moniker Horseshoe Harriet before she was identified. Early in the 1980s, Pelkey resided in Anchorage, Alaska, and she vanished on July 19, 1983. Delynn Sugar Renee Fry, a 22-year-old former resident of Anchorage, Alaska, was last seen sometime in March 1983 but was not immediately reported missing. She was abducted and killed by Hansen. She was buried as Jane Doe in an Anchorage cemetery after her body was discovered on a Knik River sandbar by a pilot trying out new tires on August 20, 1985. It was not until 1989 that she was identified when an Alaska state trooper recognized her jewelry in a case file photo. Paula Golding, 30, was a dancer in Anchorage when, on April 25, 1983, Hansen offered her money before kidnapping her. He drove her to his aircraft, shackled her, and demanded she exit the aircraft under threat of being shot. Once they reached a remote spot, she fought with him and attempted to get away, according to Hansen. She fled, and he fired a .223 rifle at her, killing her. On September 2, 1983, she was discovered on the Knik River, buried in a shallow grave. She had been wounded in the back, but because her clothing was undamaged, it is possible that she was shot while still naked and then clothed before being buried. Cindy Paulson, 17, met Hansen on June 13, 1983, in Anchorage. After agreeing to pay for sex, Hansen instead pulled a .357 Magnum on her and kidnapped her. She was taken to his home, bound and sexually assaulted before Hansen took her to the Merrill Field, where his airplane was. Hansen left Paulson alone in his car while he began loading his plane, threatening to kill her if she ran away. She ran away toward Fifth Avenue. There, she was picked up by a passing driver, Robert Yount. Yount took Paulson to a safe location and shortly after, called police. At about the same time, a security guard at the Merrill Field noticed some suspicious activity and although he made no contact, he noted the license tag for Hansen's car. Police located and interviewed Paulson about the attack. On July 10, 1981, dancer Molly Larson, aged 28, was reported missing from Anchorage, Alaska. On April 24, 1984, her body was discovered in a parking lot close to the Knik Arm Bridge. Dancer Teresa Watson, 22, was last seen in Anchorage on March 25, 1983. She informed her roommate that she was meeting a man who would give her $300 in exchange for an hour or two of company. At Scenic Lake, Hansen abducted her and killed her. Hansen was unable to bury her since the earth in the region was still frozen. He abandoned her where she had died. She was discovered on May 17, 1984. 24-year-old Angela Lynn Feddern was last seen on 4th Avenue in Anchorage sometime in February 1983. She was not reported missing until May. The owner of a nightclub reported that Feddern, one of his dancers, had gone missing. Hansen had kidnapped and murdered her. Feddern's body was found on April 26, 1984, on a small lake near the larger Figure 8 Lake. 20-year-old Tamara Tammy Peterson was a dancer at a nightclub in Anchorage. The last her family heard from her was during a phone call on August 7, 1982, when she claimed to have had been offered money to pose for photographs. She was kidnapped and murdered by Hansen. Her body was not found until Hansen confessed and pointed out her body's location on a map. She was found 1.5 miles from the Old Nick Bridge on April 29, 1984. Upon his arrest, Robert Hansen faced a litany of charges, including assault, kidnapping, multiple weapons offenses, theft, and insurance fraud. The latter charge revolved around an insurance claim linked to the alleged theft of trophies, the proceeds of which Hansen used to acquire his plane. During the trial, he contended that he had recovered the trophies in his backyard but failed to notify the insurer. Hansen's legal predicament intensified when ballistics tests unequivocally matched bullets from crime scenes to his rifle. Faced with damning evidence, he entered into a plea bargain, admitting guilt for the 4 homicides with available evidence: Sherry Morrow, Joanna Messina, Paula Golding, and Eklutna Annie. In exchange, Hansen negotiated to serve his sentence in a federal prison with the condition of maintaining a low profile in the press. A crucial element of the plea bargain was Hansen's cooperation in decoding the markings on his aviation map and disclosing the locations of his victims' bodies. Revealing disturbing insights during this process, Hansen confirmed the police's abduction theory, acknowledging that some potential victims were spared if they convinced him not to report them to the police. He disclosed the chilling information that his killing spree had commenced in the early 1970s. In a chilling revelation, Hansen led investigators to 17 grave sites in and around south-central Alaska, with 12 previously unknown to law enforcement. Despite his cooperation, Hansen withheld information about 3 marks on his map, including those near Resurrection Bay, near Seward, where authorities suspect the graves of Mary Thill and Megan Emmerich. Hansen denied responsibility for their deaths. The remains of 12 out of a probable 21 to 37 victims were exhumed by the police and returned to grieving families. Facing the consequences of his heinous crimes, Hansen received a staggering sentence of 461 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Initially incarcerated at the United States Penitentiary in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, he was later returned to Alaska. His time behind bars included spells at Lemon Creek Correctional Center in Juneau and Spring Creek Correctional Center in Seward until May 2014. Due to health concerns, he was transferred to the Anchorage Correctional Complex, where he ultimately met his end. Robert Hansen's dark chapter concluded on August 21, 2014, at the age of 75, as he succumbed to natural causes related to lingering health conditions at Alaska Regional Hospital in Anchorage. The death of the butcher baker marked the end of a reign of terror that had left a lasting scar on the Alaskan landscape.